So if you own a console or a computer or a fridge, you've probably played or at least heard of Fortnite. The thing about making a game that includes monetization and putting it on either the App Store or Google Play Store is that they both take it upon themselves to take a whole 30% of the revenue generated from the apps published on them. Since Fortnite Mobile was generating millions of dollars a month on each of these platforms, Epic Games was losing like millions of dollars a month from these crazy fees. Now, they weren't too stoked about this, so they made an announcement on August 13th, 2020, basically saying that there would be two purchase options when purchasing V-Bucks now. In the example they showed, you could either spend $9.99 if you purchased 1,000 V-Bucks through the App Store, or you could spend $7.99 if you directly paid Epic. Now, unless you're lying, everyone is going to want to save that extra $2, leaving Apple with nothing. This sounds all fine and good until you realize that this tactic is strictly not allowed in both Apple and Google's terms of service. Wasting absolutely no time, both Apple and Google removed Fortnite from their stores just hours after this announcement was made. Now, Epic is pretty pissed about this, so they immediately filed antitrust lawsuits. With Apple, Epic argued that their 30% take in developers' revenue was completely unfair and anti-competitive. Epic wanted everyone to know what Apple was doing, so they started this hashtag Free Fortnite movement and launched their own parody ad mocking an old ad Apple released in 1984. Now, this shit is really funny because if you're unaware, Apple made their original ad back then in the context of, oh, we're here to liberate all of you consumers from these big tech giants with our fancy new Macintosh. Where Fortnite in 2020 in their ad was like, Apple is this big tech giant, and what they're doing is some major BS. In September, Apple was like, oh hell nah, and countersued Epic Games for breaching the contract they signed when they originally put Fortnite on the App Store. Apple basically sought out compensation for their lost revenue and damages after Epic Games introduced their own payment system, which, mind you, was only available for hours before Apple came in and took it down anyways. The judge overseeing this insanity was Yvonne Gonzalez Rogers, and in October, Epic Games asked her for this fancy thing called a preliminary injunction. That's fancy talk for, hey, you should force Apple to allow Fortnite to stay on the App Store until the trial is over. Rogers immediately shot this request down, officially leaving Fortnite off the App Store for the foreseeable future. On May 3rd, 2021, a 3-week trial begins, with Epic Games CEO Tim Sweeney and Apple CEO Tim Cook both testify about Apple's App Store policies. Sweeney was basically like, yeah, we broke TOS, but only because they're dumb as hell. And the judge was like, yeah, you may be right, but you still gotta pay Cook over here the money that you made when you broke it. And Tim was like, okay. Now, a topic came up during this trial regarding the terminology of games as well, and I thought it was insane, so I'm putting it in the video. Tim and Tim argued whether or not games such as Minecraft and Roblox should be considered games or metaverses. They agreed that Minecraft was just a game, but disagreed what Roblox should be classified as. Epic argued that Roblox was similar to Fortnite in that it was a metaverse, and Apple was like, whoa, nah. We think Roblox is a platform that offers experiences, not games. At this point, Judge Rogers was probably dying to reach a verdict, and by September, she had one. She denied Epic's argument that the App Store was an anti-competitive monopoly, winning just 1 out of the 10 total claims they made about it, which isn't enough. However, Epic Games did win their argument that Apple shouldn't prohibit developers from informing their users of alternate payment options within their apps. Apple somehow managed to acquire this thing called a stay on the ruling of them being forced to allow these alternative payment options, which meant they didn't have to allow it until their appeals were ruled upon. Neither Epic Games nor Apple were too happy about Judge Rogers' verdict, and so they both made appeals that dragged the court case out even more. Now, because court cases are often slow and uneventful and last for years, sometimes not much happens, which was basically 2022 summarized. Both Epic's and Apple's appeals were being processed at this time, so throughout the entirety of this year, Apple was able to keep their policies unchanged and Fortnite off their stores. After making Apple wait for over 6 months, the Supreme Court basically told them to F off and denied hearing their appeals, finally forcing Apple to allow developers to link external payment options for their consumers. This all sounds amazing, except Apple's like, you know what, fine, we'll let you offer these options to your consumers, but we're gonna throw on a 27% fee on all transactions made through those links. Oh, and also, we're going to put these scare screens to hopefully scare your customers from using these payment methods in the first place. This was a big mistake on Apple's part, and Epic Games was like, Your Honor, this shit literally makes your previous ruling useless, and filed a motion to hold Apple in contempt of the court. Needless to say, Judge Rogers was freaking pissed and ruled that Apple did actually violate the court's decision regarding the allowment of external payment methods. Like any reasonable person would, she sided with Epic Games and said that Apple's 27% fee and their scare screens completely undermined the court's ruling in the first place. To make matters worse for Apple, Rogers actually referred them to the Department of Justice for potential criminal charges because, as you can guess, violating court orders does actually have consequences. Apple is obviously trying to appeal all of this, as they so often like to do, but that aspect of the case is still ongoing, with no outcome yet. By early May 2025, Apple is finally forced to update its App Store guidelines to allow developers to offer external payment methods, this time without any 27% fees or scare screens. This change meant Fortnite now fit under Apple's new TOS, and Epic Games resubmitted the game for review on May 9th. Now, don't get your hopes up yet, because Apple still has one more trick up their sleeve. You see, around 90% of all apps submitted to the App Store are either approved or denied within the first 48 hours. And as you can imagine, Apple is in a pretty bad mood at this state, so they held Fortnite for over a week after its submission. And if you know Fortnite, they update their game a lot. And so Epic had to remove their original submission of the game after so long and resubmit a newer version, only to get denied anyways. Apple quickly claimed it had the right to reject any app from their store, but Epic was like, bro, I'll see you in court. On May 19th, Epic asked Rogers about her opinion on the matter, to which she said, quote, "The Apple official who is personally responsible for ensuring compliance shall personally appear at the hearing hereby set for Tuesday, May 27th. That is, if both parties couldn't come to an agreement by then." This apparently terrified Apple, and Fortnite was literally accepted onto the App Store the very next day. Now don't forget that Google also took down Fortnite when Apple did as well, and so another lawsuit with them was also going on in parallel with the Apple one this entire time. A federal jury actually sided with Epic Games all the way back in December 2023, but because Google also knows a thing or two about appealing every single loss they incur, Fortnite is still off the Google Play Store. Let me know what you guys think of this insanity in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.